The most effective manipulation is the kind you never notice. This principle sits at the heart of modern rage farming operations, invisible technical frameworks designed to trigger emotional responses while bypassing rational analysis. For communication professionals tasked with defending organizational reputation, understanding these hidden mechanics is no longer optional. This documentary provides a comprehensive breakdown of how digital outrage is manufactured, amplified, and monetized in today's media ecosystem, equipping you with the technical knowledge to recognize and counter these threats before they impact your organization. Ever wonder how a single tweet or corporate announcement can spiral into a full-blown crisis within hours? It's rarely accidental. Behind many digital firestorms lies a sophisticated operation with standardized components and processes, what we call the anatomy of rage farming. While this may seem like random chaos, these incidents often follow predictable patterns that communication professionals can learn to identify and counter. Most PR teams today focus their energy on crisis response after the damage has already begun. They craft carefully worded statements, engage in real-time social monitoring, and attempt damage control through traditional channels. But these approaches often fail because they don't address the technical infrastructure that powers rage farming campaigns before they reach critical mass. The first critical component in the rage farming assembly line is context stripping. This occurs when legitimate corporate messages are deliberately extracted from their original framework. A company's announcement about a new hiring initiative, for example, might include details about qualifications, training requirements, and overall talent strategy. Rage farmers systematically remove these contextual elements, isolating fragments that can be reframed to generate maximum outrage. This deliberate dismantling creates information vacuums that audience imagination readily fills with worst-case interpretations. Once content has been stripped of its context, the second phase begins: narrative reconstruction. This is where rage farmers employ strategic reframing techniques, inserting false premises that transform neutral or positive corporate initiatives into seemingly inflammatory provocations. A company's sustainability commitment might be reconstructed as evidence of an extreme political agenda. What makes this technique particularly effective is that it often preserves factual elements while completely transforming their meaning through selective emphasis and manufactured context. The third technical component, and perhaps the most sophisticated, involves algorithmic exploitation. Content creators working to manufacture outrage deliberately incorporate elements that trigger engagement-based promotion mechanisms across platforms. These might include intentional typos that prompt corrective comments, strategically place controversial terms that activate moderation systems, creating false impressions of censorship, or crafting headlines specifically designed to exploit emotional response patterns detected by recommendation algorithms. A revealing example of these techniques in action involves United Airlines' diversity-focused pilot training program. What began as a standard industry initiative to expand the talent pipeline quickly transformed into a manufactured crisis when rage farmers stripped away program details regarding rigorous safety standards and qualification requirements. Through narrative reconstruction, the program was reframed as prioritizing diversity over passenger safety, a completely false dichotomy that nonetheless gained traction. Algorithmic exploitation then accelerated the spread as outrage-inducing headlines prompted concerned users to engage with and share the misleading content. What's particularly notable about this case isn't just the resulting reputational damage, but how predictable the pattern was. The technical blueprint followed the same sequence we see in countless other manufactured controversies: extract from context, insert inflammatory premises, and exploit algorithmic amplification. The incident demonstrates how even well-established brands with substantial communication resources remain vulnerable when they don't recognize these specific technical patterns early enough. This systematic construction of outrage isn't random or chaotic. It's engineered for maximum impact through refined processes. For communication professionals, understanding these structural components provides a significant advantage. By recognizing the technical signatures of rage farming operations, organizations can develop early detection systems that identify these campaigns in their formation stages before they achieve viral momentum. Effective early detection involves monitoring for specific signatures, sudden surges in out-of-context quotes, the emergence of false dichotomies related to your organization's messaging, or unusual engagement patterns that suggest algorithmic manipulation. When these warning signs appear, rapid response teams can deploy countermeasures that restore context, correct narrative distortions, and disrupt algorithmic amplification. Beyond the tactical dimension of rage, farming lies something far more insidious: its psychological foundation. While technical detection systems provide critical early warning, understanding why humans amplify outrage requires looking deeper into our cognitive architecture. When people share rage-inducing content, they're rarely making a rational choice. They're responding to sophisticated psychological triggers that bypass their analytical defenses completely. The effectiveness of rage farming isn't random. It's precisely calibrated to exploit specific cognitive biases that make us vulnerable to manipulation. Confirmation bias stands as one of the primary vulnerabilities where individuals naturally gravitate toward information that reinforces their existing beliefs. When rage farmers target corporate messaging, they deliberately frame it to activate this bias, ensuring the outrage resonates with pre-existing suspicions about an organization or brand. This exploitation becomes even more powerful when combined with tribal identity activation. By positioning corporate statements as attacks on group values, rage farmers trigger a powerful us versus them dynamic. Once activated, tribal identities overwhelm rational thinking processes. We stop analyzing information objectively and instead process it through the lens of group loyalty. This explains why organizations that respond with facts and clarifications often find themselves shouting into the void. Their audience has already shifted from analytical to tribal processing. The second psychological mechanism powering these campaigns is emotional contagion. Research confirms that negative emotions, particularly anger, spread through social networks with remarkable efficiency. In fact, anger propagates 70% faster than other emotions across digital platforms. This isn't accidental. Rage farmers deliberately craft content to maximize emotional arousal, knowing that each share exponentially increases their campaign's reach and impact. What makes this particularly dangerous for organizations is how group polarization amplifies these effects. When discussions occur within like-minded communities, initially moderate positions intensify toward more extreme endpoints. A slightly controversial corporate statement becomes increasingly inflammatory as it circulates within homogeneous online groups, with each iteration pushing toward more extreme interpretations. The third critical psychological component is what communication scientists call cognitive bandwidth taxation. When audiences experience strong emotional arousal, particularly anger, their ability to process information critically diminishes significantly. The availability cascade compounds this effect as repeated exposure to the same inflammatory narrative increases its perceived validity. These combined factors explain why even intelligent, educated professionals can fall victim to outrageous claims that would seem implausible under normal cognitive conditions. Disney's experience during education legislation controversies perfectly illustrates these dynamics. What began as a standard corporate statement was systematically weaponized through rage farming techniques. The narrative was deliberately reframed to provoke maximum outrage, triggering tribal identities on multiple sides of the issue. As emotional contagion spread this narrative across social networks, the availability cascade created a perception of legitimacy around even the most extreme interpretations. The result was a prolonged crisis that traditional PR approaches failed to resolve. Most organizations respond to manufactured outrage by doubling down on rational appeals and fact-checking, strategies that fundamentally misunderstand the psychological terrain of the battle. These approaches assume audiences are making rational evaluations rather than responding to emotional triggers that have already circumvented their analytical faculties. The intersection of technical infrastructure with these psychological vulnerabilities creates what crisis communication professionals call the perfect storm of modern reputation threats. When content is strategically stripped of context, reconstructed with inflammatory framing, and algorithmically amplified to audiences whose cognitive defenses have been compromised by emotional arousal, traditional crisis responses don't just underperform, They often backfire completely. So what's your best defense against the rage machine? Proactive preparation rather than reactive crisis management. Building a comprehensive truth bank gives your organization an accessible repository of facts, context, and evidence about your positions that can be rapidly deployed when false narratives emerge. This isn't just a collection of statements, it's strategic armor in the battle for narrative control. Beyond simply stockpiling facts, sophisticated early warning systems represent the next frontier in reputation defense. These systems must evolve past basic social listening to detect coordinated messaging patterns in unusual engagement spikes before they escalate into full-blown crises. The most advanced systems can identify multiple accounts making similar statements within compressed timeframes, a telltale signature of manufactured outrage campaigns. AI-driven analytics are transforming how organizations detect coordinated inauthentic behavior across platforms, providing precious lead time to prepare appropriate responses. This technological preparation, combined with psychologically informed messaging strategies, creates a powerful shield against even the most sophisticated rage farming operations. That's it for this episode on rage farming. I encourage you to subscribe to this channel, where we regularly unpack emerging trends in crisis communication and provide actionable insights for communication professionals on the front lines. If you prefer to digest this critical information in written form, our weekly newsletter, Wag the Dog, offers in-depth analysis of crisis, risk, and emergency communication strategies. Visit wagthedog.io to join communication leaders who are building resilience against manufactured outrage before it strikes. In a world where the most effective manipulation is the kind you never notice, your greatest defense is the knowledge to see it coming. Thanks for listening.